Cops, what's the most BS sounding excuse you got that actually turned out to be true? So, cop here, got a call of a domestic dispute that sounded very heated and a lot of banging was heard. I get to the scene and I can hear someone yelling and brawling. Doesn't sound good at all. Guy answers the door, shirt off and angry, but seems bewildered as to why police had been called. He told me he was building IKEA furniture. Sounds like the most BS thing. But we enter, see the new IKEA furniture half set up, and no one else is home. Color me surprised. Well, I guess forget anger management, right? This guy needs an IKEA furniture assembly class like the rest of us. With snacks, that'd be nice. Story 2. Former Marechaussee here. For those unfamiliar, it's a Dutch thing, a police force with military status. Well, we also had jurisdiction over American soldiers stationed here. One day, we got called to a possible case of domestic cruelty. We arrived at the house and the guy opened the door wearing only garments. He told us he and his wife were role-playing. Of course, we didn't trust this and asked to see his wife. After he denied us entry, we told him we would come back with a warrant. He reluctantly agreed to let us enter, so we went in and he opened the basement door. Inside was the freakiest quote-unquote playroom I'd ever seen, and in the middle was his wife. We asked her, but she told us everything was okay. It turned out they were really into some of that stuff. We asked them to keep the screaming to a minimum, confined to the basement. We did the whole thing with a straight face, but as soon as we were in the car... Story 3. No cops were posting in here anyway, so I'll throw my head into the ring as a defense attorney. Guy pulled over for impaired driving and charged later with OWI. My boss gets the criminal complaint and the guy shows up for his initial appearance and tells her he hadn't been drinking despite horrifically failing the sobriety test. She's literally sitting next to him and he's obviously hammered again. Disappointing but not uncommon for alcoholics. The deputies arrest him for bail jumping because he drove himself to court that day. And while out on bail, he's not supposed to drink. He adamantly denies drinking. Tests come back. He didn't drink. Dude's diabetic without knowing it and naturally got himself intoxicated because sometimes when it goes untreated, diabetes can cause symptoms that just look like intoxication. Got him some insulin and the charges were dismissed. Story 4. I was driving with my fiancé and we went through a roadblock where they checked registration and crap and we got to the cops and they asked for our registration. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, so I open up the glove box, and right there is a clear unmarked baggie filled to the brim with catnip. I completely forgot it was there and just froze. Wide-eyed, I turned to look at the cop, shining his light through my open window, and he's frozen too, just staring at the baggie with this look on his face like, really? I just started immediately professing, OMG, I swear to God, this is catnip. You can take it and smell it or test it or whatever like, I swear. And at this point, it's just so ridiculous that I start cracking up, and the cop takes it and reasonably deduces I'm telling the truth. And he starts laughing and calls his partner over and tells her what happened, and they both just cackled away for a minute and then sent us on our way. Story 5. Okay, so I'm going to tell my crazy story as a person behind the wheel. My uncle was divorcing his terrible wife. He was no saint himself, but definitely on the right side of their divorce. The wife was still on the paperwork to take their 2 kids out of the school, even though my uncle had temporary custody, while the courts did their thing. She had previously threatened to take them both and just run away, so I don't know why she was still on the paperwork. On picture day that year, she showed up to the school and signed both kids out and disappeared. I was not involved in the crazy process of calling the police and tracking the kids down, but I was pulled from school that day because I had my driver's license and could be an extra pair of hands. They managed to find the kids and they were turned over to my grandmother and mom, but my niece was distraught that she would be missing picture day. It was her first time away from her terrible mother and she was finally allowed to be a cheerleader, a dream in her tiny eyes. So me, having my car and nothing else better to do, offered to take her back to the school. My mom got the school to agree to keep the person there a little longer, but it was going to be by the skin of our teeth that we would make it as this was rural okay. We got in the car and I blasted down those dirt roads doing approximately 70 in a 35. Not a good decision on my part, but I was an anxiety-ridden 17-year-old dealing with a nasty divorce and kidnapping for the first time in my life. We of course get pulled over. I'm freaking out because I can't afford that bad of a ticket and all that crap that was coming in that day. The cop listened to the story and ignored my barely held-in tears and said he would let us off with a warning because he believed the story. And the only reason he believed the story was that he had just pulled over my uncle going the same speed, the opposite direction, on the same road, and telling the same story. Story 6. I was the one with the excuse. I forgot my keys at a friend's place before going out drinking that night. Got home at 2 a.m., no keys. Only one of our windows didn't have ghetto bars, so I took the screen out and started pushing and smacking it up. Locks were on the sides, only providing friction. As I'm halfway in, I just feel whoomp. Got tackled into the house. The officer was still outside, holding onto my ankles. I looked up and just said, "I'm astonished by your response time. I actually live here. Let me get up, unlock the door, and give you my ID." So I did, and he stares at it for a second, then says sorry and sprints off to look for the person they were actually in the area looking for. Story 7. Not a cop, but I had a run in with one that was really funny once. When I was 18, I was on a double date with a friend, and we stepped out of a restaurant to smoke. A cop came up and started pestering us, telling us there had been a break in into cars in the area. Eventually, he said he needed to pat us down, and he pulled a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket. He got a smug look on his face and asked, "So what's in here, huh?" My friend said the Emancipation Proclamation with a completely straight face. The cop opened the bag, pulled out a small booklet, got embarrassed, and let us go. My friend had been to the Lincoln Museum earlier that day and did actually have a small copy of the Emancipation Proclamation in his pocket. Story 8. Former cop here. I was behind a vehicle that couldn't stay in the lane, kept swerving, etc. It was 1 a.m. and I thought it was another intoxicated idiot on the road. I pulled him over and the guy was a straight up schmuck to me. He screamed me out, yelling, and I noticed his speech was slurred. I get him out of the car and I could smell a fruity scent on his breath and he had to lean against the car for support. I asked him how much he had to drink and he told me to go away. By this point, I was ready to bring him in for a DUI, but I just had a feeling something wasn't right. I called EMS to come check on him and his sugar was at 40, not intoxicated, just a diabetic. If I would have arrested him, he probably would have passed away before I finished the paperwork. Go with your gut if something doesn't seem right. Story 9. Not a cop, but I have a pretty good one. In high school, some of my buddies sold grass. They drove around in a car with a scale, baggies, and 2 to 4 ounces at any given time. One day, T and E decided to go to a really good taco stand for lunch in between deliveries. E was driving, they were making their way downtown when E started laughing. E, did you see that? T, no, what? E, I'll turn around, you gotta see this. T, dude, don't get us pulled over, what the hell, chill. E made a U-turn and turned down the street, nothing there, so we stopped in front of a random house to look around. T, what the heck, just drive. E, I just saw a dude pushing a stroller with 2 wiener dogs in it. T, you're stupid. As soon as E started driving again, a cop car pulled up behind them and lit them up. Cop 1, what are you guys doing? E, panicking a bit. I saw a guy pushing a stroller with dachshunds in it and had to show my friend. Cop 2, how come you're parked in front of this known house and your car smells like grass? T, silence. E, well, this guy with a stroller and… Cops, get out of the car. The car got searched and they found all the contraband. As soon as they were getting loaded into the back of the cop car, all handcuffed up, Cop 2 just stopped. Cop 2, hey, Cop 1, look at that. Cop 1, no crap. Everyone looked at this old guy pushing a stroller with his 2 dachshunds poking their heads out. The cops burst out laughing. They both got charged with possession. Good times. I swear, officer, I was just looking at the cute dog stroller. Isn't a valid defense for possession? Story 10. I had a run-in with the cops a few years ago, and I wonder exactly what they thought when they first stopped me. I had taken a cab back from a work party, and I was pretty intoxicated. My friend and I had just moved to this new apartment, so I accidentally gave the cab driver the wrong address. I ended up on a block that looked very similar to mine and a building that looked like mine. There were 2 doors before getting to my apartment door, which was on the first floor. Like my apartment building, they left the first door unlocked and locked the second door. I kept trying my keys to open it, but I couldn't and was confused. I went outside to look for my car, and it wasn't parked there. That's when I realized I was on the wrong block. I started walking in the direction I thought my apartment was when a cop car pulled up. They asked me what I'm doing, and I tell them I'm really intoxicated and I just want to go home, which was the honest truth. They told me they got a call about someone trying to get into an apartment building. I guess the people in that apartment building woke up and thought I was trying to break in. They were super suspicious of me at first, but eventually it became clear I was just some intoxicated idiot and not a burglar. They ran me through to make sure I didn't have any warrants or anything, and when I checked out, they offered me a ride home. The ride back was hilarious because when we were getting to my apartment, I tried telling them that it was a bit complicated to get to because of all the one-way streets. The officer driving was like, "Who do you think you're with?" and then turned on the lights and went the wrong way down the street to get me home faster. It honestly felt like I was with the 2 cops from Superbad. Story 11. This was my favorite story from my 4th grade teacher, not a cop. She went to a cousin's wedding in mid-July. The cousin had overestimated how much champagne they would need at the reception and was giving away bottles to anyone who was interested, so my teacher took 3 and put them in the backseat of her car. Again, this was a hot summer day in July. After saying their goodbyes, my teacher, her husband, and her parents piled into the car and pulled out into the highway, where 2 bottles burst open, spraying champagne everywhere and causing quite a ruckus. Of course, while this was happening, the car was swerving as the driver was also getting bathed in sparkling champagne. So it came as no surprise that as soon as they collected themselves, they saw the familiar flashing lights of a state trooper and pulled over. According to my teacher, the first thing the cop said was, "I'm not going to ask if you've been drinking because I can smell it from here." My teacher tried explaining what had happened, but the cop wouldn't hear of it and ordered everyone out of the car. That's when the cop saw that everyone, both drivers and passengers, were dressed in their finery, but soaked with champagne and looking quite shaken. A cursory search showed the open bottles, but the cop still insisted on a quick sobriety check just to make sure. Story 12. Not a cop, but I once got pulled over by a fire truck. It was Orlando in August 1990. It was close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I worked for a computer rental company. We would rent computers to companies in town for trade shows or for a lot of other situations. The company van was a ragged-out Chrysler minivan with 180,000 miles on it. The AC didn't work, so the windows were down. I was coming back to the office in heavy rush hour traffic and found myself in a right turn-only lane, unable to get out in time. So I was forced to make the right turn. I hit the gas to speed up and get in front of people making a left turn into my same direction. I had to get all the way over to the left side to make a U-turn, so I cut off a fire truck to do it, one of the big squarish fire trucks with the flat front. I cut them off and got in the left turn lane to wait for the green arrow. I looked out the window to my left and saw a Dixie chopper lawnmower mowing the grass on the side of the road, maybe 15 feet from me. It was already hot, but this tremendous wave of heat came in through the driver's side window. I thought, man, that's a hot lawnmower. The light turned green and I started my U-turn. Halfway through it, this cloud of, I thought, steam came out of the hood and covered the windshield so I couldn't see. The power steering also failed, so I fought the car, trying to get back to the gas station at the corner so I could find a payphone. Yes, that's how old I am. But because I couldn't see, I missed the turn and ended up turning into an apartment complex. About this time, the cloud stopped and I could see again. Still, no power steering, so I fought the car to do a U-turn so I could get back to the gas station. At this point, the fire truck I had cut off turned into the apartment complex, full lights flashing, and blocked me in. 2 huge firefighters got out of the truck holding fire extinguishers like beer cans. "Excuse me, sir, did you know your van was on fire?" Turns out, while I was cutting them off, I'd been shooting flames out from under the passenger side of the van. They hit the lights, did a U-turn, and came back to me. The wave of heat wasn't from the lawnmower. They checked out the van and let me go. The cause turned out to be a damaged power steering line. It sprayed power steering fluid all over the exhaust manifold and caught fire. Story 13. Former park ranger. First week on the job, we pull up and see a couple of kids smoking in their car with the windows down. The city has an ordinance against smoking on park property, but it is too petty to give them a ticket. We approach the car, and they are visibly nervous. My FTO looks through the windows and sees a couple of beer cans in the car. Bingo. We get them out and start running their info. They're all underage, but old enough to smoke cigarettes. My FTO asks them where the beer came from. The driver says he recycles. FTO laughs and begins to search the car. I'm finishing up running their info, and these guys are being really respectful. FTO finishes searching the cab and goes to open the trunk. All of a sudden, I hear him burst out laughing, and he's laughing so hard he can barely breathe. He waves me over to look at the trunk of the car, and it is level with crushed cans and bottles. My FTO said that he has heard that excuse for 20 years, and this is the first time it was true. He walked up, uncuffed the driver, and let them go. Story 14. Not a cop, but I did get stopped by one for eating a taco. I worked at a community college in LA that had a high school right next to it. There were a lot of substances sold through the fence at the high school, so cops were always driving up and down the street between the schools. I couldn't get a parking pass since I just worked at the school, so I always parked on that street. I hit up Taco Bell for lunch and was sitting on my car eating my double-decker tacos when a cop drove past. Next thing I knew, he was flipping a U-turn and heading right for me. He slid to a stop, driver window to driver window, and yelled, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Stunned, I just said, eating my lunch? Well, he wasn't buying it and said I was hiding something. I just held up my taco and looked so confused. He burst out laughing and peeled out. I saw him a few times after that, and he always waved and had the biggest grin on his face. Story 15. Not a cop, but I once pulled over a college kid for erratic driving and found 100 grams of grass on him. I also found grass under the other college kids in the car. The driver fell on the sword and told me all of it was his, letting his friends walk free. I like this kid. However, during the search, we found packaged pills in the cellophane of a cigarette pack with the top melted closed. God dang it, intensifies. I asked the kid if he was dealing at school. I told him I was aware of the prescription pill epidemic. He said no and spun a huge yarn about how he only carries a few on him because he's had his orange pill bottle stolen so many times. The kid seemed like a pretty good dude. I decided to take the X-Files approach. My supervisor told me to pursue charges for dealing, blah, 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 blah. I told the kid he had one chance to prove he was telling the truth. He showed me the broken glass under his driver's seat from a vehicle burglary. Gotta do better, I thought. I followed behind him back to his dorm. He let me in and showed me the busted footlocker he kept them in under his bed. Dunno, kinda weak, I thought. My supervisor was telling me to hurry up and drop the axe. I told him to do better. He called one of the soccer team assistants and we met him in the locker room. He showed me the little wooden locker which had a broken lock. Yeah. The assistant coach told me they had replaced the lock on his cabinet 3 times. Campus security had numerous reports of medicine theft from this kid. Nice. I called my supervisor and told him I had no grounds to pursue delivery charges. The poor schmuck just kept getting his pills stolen, and being the big dumb meatball he was, he started packaging them like that. I ended up talking to his best friend a couple of months later while breaking up a house party. The friend told me the kid was a stand-up guy who only used grass due to extreme anxiety, totally believable from my interaction with him, and had never sold anything in his life. The friend thanked me and told me his buddy spoke well of me. The friend also told me he had to drive his buddy to the hospital a few hours after I left him from a panic attack due to the whole incident. I felt bad for the kid, so now whenever I see him smoking in his car in the mall parking lot, I just wave. Story 16. Was doing a tour as an MP, not my normal job, but a whole other story, and we got called on a domestic. At the house, there's this huge corn-fed guy about 6'4" and 275 pounds, and a petite Asian girl about 4'10" and 95 pounds soaking wet. The whole house was in disarray, and the call had come because of yelling heard by the neighbors. She was crying and talking in an Asian language that none of us understood and kept gesturing toward her huge husband. He wasn't talking. We wrap him up, take him to the station, and are trying to interview him, but he's not saying much. We intend to charge him. We notice somewhere along the way that he has horrible welts all along the back of his hands and along his forearms. It took a lot of prying, but we finally got out of him that his wife would hurt him with wire coat hangers when she was mad, and apparently that was pretty often. He was too embarrassed to admit to anybody that he was being mistreated by his wife, who was less than a third of his size. We finally got it straightened out, turned her over to the local police, and barred her from base. Hopefully the guy got the help he needed. And if you're enjoying the video, learning a thing or two from these stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 17. I can't speak for the cop, but freshman year of college, I was having a nice evening outside, drinking some soda and smoking a tobacco pipe with my 3 roommates, long-term friends I grew up with. When one went into the dorm, he called me a minute later and said, "Come back to the dorm, police are here and they're looking for you." I am on my way over and they see me and run up to me in case I were to run. They asked my name and if I was here all night. I confirmed both my name and that I was at the dorm all evening. Apparently, another freshman guy my age, build, and height signed in under my name for an intramural flag football game, got into a tussle with an opposing team member and punched him. He was last seen fleeing our direction. I'm sure my excuse sounded completely bogus, but it was the truth. Story 18. Not a cop, but this happened to my mom. A long time ago, my mom was driving home from work. She was swerving on the road and was eventually pulled over. The cops that pulled her over assumed that she was intoxicated and decided to just dump her on her doorstep since the car was only right down the street from where she got picked up. At the time, my brother was only 10, so needless to say, the cops left my mother with a 10-year-old. Her neighbor happened to see the cops drop her off and drive off. The neighbor just so happened to be a nurse at the local hospital. When she saw how my mother was left, she immediately called 911. The same cops came and made the claim that she was intoxicated and they didn't need to be there. It turned out that my mother was going in shock and was rushed to the hospital. Prior to this, my mother had gone to a chiropractor who had done an acupuncture procedure on her neck that caused damage to her nerves. She actually ended up in a coma for 2 weeks where, when she did come out of that coma, she basically forgot everything. It took 3 years for her to make a, thankfully, full recovery. She still doesn't remember some things from her past, but I'm glad that someone was there for her when this happened. Story 19. Not a cop, and I'm so late to the party here that I doubt many will see this, but here goes. I was this person for some 2 lucky cops. It was the holiday season a few years ago. I worked at a coffee shop at the time and went to a coworker's New Year's ugly sweater party or something. Had a few drinks until 10 p.m., then switched to water. My one friend started talking to me about tea because we worked with coffee and tea. He gave me a tea bag and a plastic baggie. I put it in my pocket. 2 a.m. rolled around and I left, but I was tired as hell. I wanted to get home and get to sleep, so I was blasting music to keep me awake and probably going a little too fast, but not drastically so. Anyway, the party lights kicked on behind me and I pulled over. We went through the questions. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Have you been drinking? Doing anything else? I blew clean on the breathalyzer. I walked the fine line, balanced on one leg. Then one of the cops patted me down and reached my pocket. Him, "Son, what do you have in your pocket?" Me, knowing how ridiculous I'm about to sound. "It's tea, officer." Him, about as dubious as you can expect. "You expect me to believe you have tea in your pocket?" Me, "My friend gave it to me." At this point, his partner looked to be trying not to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. The cop in front of me looked over his shoulder at his partner in a "you believe this guy" sort of way, then back to me. Him, "Get it out." He held out his hand while I fumbled around and withdrew the plastic baggie from my pants pocket, complete with the single serving of tea neatly labeled, and handed it to the suddenly bewildered officer. Him, "Why the hell do you have tea in your pocket?" he asked. Me, I like tea, officer. I responded in probably the most matter-of-fact way possible. His partner finally gave up on restraining his laughter. The other cop gave me the tea back and told me to go home and sleep. I never could bring myself to try that tea. I still have it in the same bag on my shelf. Story 20. Stopped a guy on a suspended registration and he started getting upset, but not at me. I asked him why he's so upset. He says it's the wife's car. She stopped making payments and it got suspended. On top of that, he was mad because he was on the way to the new girlfriend's and she was probably going to dump him if he no-showed her. I issued him a criminal ticket thinking he was going to back off and leave the story. Instead, he goes, I totally get why you gave me a ticket, but I don't want this girl to dump me. She's a smoke. Can you give me a ride there? I say, fine, but you have to introduce me, again thinking he'd back off the story. He says, okay, deal, and away we go. We're sitting outside and this girl refuses to come out, so he puts me on the phone. I tell her that it's either she comes out and says hi or I bring him to jail. Out she comes, 11 out of 10. Dude hit the frickin' jackpot. He also pleaded guilty to the ticket. Haha, I never told him to do that, but I got a kick out of it. I like to think it was him giving me a wave back. Story 21. A police officer here, 3 years ago, living in CO. The station got a call about a ghost in someone's house. I wasn't the one on the phone, but apparently the person was hysterical and hard to understand. I arrived on the scene. This woman of about 40 was standing in her front yard. The house is upper middle class, pretty bland. She swears there's a ghost inside. The only reason we didn't disregard the call is because she claimed there was screaming in her attic. She claimed the ghost was doing it. I was supposed to make sure an animal wasn't stuck up there or something. She explains that she's been hearing the screaming and bumping on the walls the past 2 days. She's the only one who lives there, no pets who would cause it, neighbors are on vacation, so of course the logical explanation is a ghost. She was far too afraid to check the attic, so I headed up there. It was full of cobwebs and musty, and of course the only light bulb didn't work. I take a step, and all of a sudden I hear banging and muffled yelling. Navigating with my flashlight, I head over to the source, a corner in the far back. There was a homeless man there. His leg had fallen through the floor and was stuck, and he couldn't get out. He started crying tears of joy when I walked over, thanking me and asking for help simultaneously. I pull him out, trying to scratch his leg as little as possible, and I lead him outside after letting him stop and get some water. He told me he was just looking for a place to spend the night, and I felt like he had gotten punished enough for his trespass. I asked if he needed anything else before I sent him on his way. Right when he opened his mouth to speak, I realized that he was a 50-foot tall gray leviathan from the Paleolithic area. He said, well, could I have about $350? I responded, I ain't giving you no $350, Loch Ness monster. Get out of here. Looking defeated, he began to make his way to the nearest lake. Story 22. Had a domestic in progress I responded to during Christmas Day, and the excuse for them fighting was, we're not mad at each other, we're just upset because we wanted to surprise the kids for Christmas. We got some deer, dressed them up, now they're destroying our house. Turns out there were literally 3 fully grown white-tailed deer in the house, somehow dressed with full bell harnesses like Santa's reindeer. I had to call the game wardens down, who were then able to help me remove the deer from the property without injury to us or them. How they managed to get the deer and dress them up is still a mystery to this day. Story 23. One night I'm out working, and as I go down the street, fairly nice middle-class area surrounded by some high-crime neighborhoods. Around midnight I see a dude on a bike, no lights on, pulling a lawnmower behind him on a rope. I immediately flip a 180 and light him up, recognize the guy as a local homeless dude with some prior burglary and theft arrests. I walk up and just open with, dude, come on. Guy holds out his hands and swears he didn't steal the lawnmower, claims someone just gave it to him. I ask who, and he doesn't know a name, so I demand he tell me where to find said lawnmower owner. The directions he gave me were literally go that way a bit, then right at a stop sign and take one of those side streets that way. It's about halfway down a street at a house that has a pickup and a car in the driveway. By this point, backup had arrived, so I left him in the presence of backup and drove off in search of his mythical donor of lawn equipment. I made a decent guess as to the first turn, then flipped a mental coin as to which of the next 3 side streets he would have gone down. I picked the second of the 3 streets and start down it. Every other frickin' house has a truck and car combo. There must have been a dozen houses that matched that description. Halfway down, I see an average-looking house and go, I'll try this one. After all, it is midnight, and this is a wild goose chase. I go up, ring the doorbell, middle-aged dude comes to the door. Hello, sir. Have you been giving away lawnmowers to random sketchy homeless guys at midnight today? Yes, as a matter of fact, he had. Homeowner goes on to complain to me that his wife was upset by his continual inability to get the mower running and had ordered him with some severity to remove the mower from the house or face the consequences. He pushed it to the curb right as a homeless guy rode by, and the latter had asked and received his permission to take it. I drove back in shock and amazement, apologized to the homeless guy and sent him on his way. A few months later, we ran into each other at a nearby gas station, and he told me it turned out just to need a new spark plug. and that he had gotten it running again before going on to sell it for $150 to someone. For years after, whenever I would run into him, he would always make sure to remind me of the money he made from selling that stolen lawnmower. LOL. Story 24. My friend and I had the cops called on us for crawling in our friend's window. He was in the bathroom, so he couldn't unlock the door, but the porch window happened to be unlocked, so we found our way in. As I was crawling in, I saw a car parked across the street with someone in it, and remarked that it must look like we were breaking in. 5 minutes later, I heard a knock at the door, opened it, and upon seeing a police officer, yelled back into the house, "Hey Jimmy, the cops are here." We explained the situation to the cop while we waited for our friend to get out of the bathroom, but I'm not sure he bought it even after Jimmy came out laughing. He gave Jimmy a serious look and asked, "Do you know these individuals?" Like, why would someone be all calm and laughing if two strangers had broken into their house? Story 25. Not a cop, but when I was in university, I went to a party and got totally loaded. I decided I shouldn't go to the bar and started walking home. En route, I remember specifically deciding I was too intoxicated. A cop was going to pick me up and I should stay at my friends Brent and Scott's place. I walked through the front door, kicked off my shoes, yelled up the stairs that it was just me, I'd done this before, and crashed on the couch. Roughly an hour and a half later, maybe around 1:30 in the morning, I wake up in cuffs. I'm really a heavy sleeper with alcohol in my system or not, so they were having a real tough time waking me. Finally, I wake, realize I can't move my arms, and see two cops and a family of four. Holy crap, what had happened? The family is just staring at me and the cops start demanding answers. Naturally, I'm like, is Brent here? The cops are not impressed. Finally, after about 20 minutes of them shouting at me, I kinda clue in. I asked them the date, it was May 1st. Their lease had literally expired the day before and the new tenants moved in. I explained and explained and explained and finally asked the cop if I could call them and prove it. They let me and I had the cop ask him what his address was the day before. Brent recited the same one I had been sleeping in. They still gave me an intoxicated in public ticket but no trespassing ticket and drove me home. Story 26. Not a cop, but neither is anyone else here. When I was in university, I lived on campus for a year. One day, a cop showed up at my door talking about me stealing checks. I hadn't stolen any checks and I told the officer as much. She let out a big sigh and told me I needed to be honest with her before it got serious. Turns out another girl attending the same school qualified for the same grant I did and called the organization to request an update as she hadn't received her check yet. They said the check had been sent out weeks prior. I guess as part of the process to issue a new check, they checked to make sure the original hadn't been cashed. In this case, it had, into my bank account. Turns out the girl has the same first and last name as me, and for reasons unknown, but the school's address as hers, she didn't live on campus. So when a check I was expecting arrived at my address with my name on it, of course I cashed it. Took the officer a few minutes to work it all out in her head, but in the end I was not hauled off to jail for stealing a check. When my actual check arrived a few days later, I just gave the other girl the cash. Story 27. Not a cop, but a close friend of mine is a state trooper. This happened in a super tiny town miles from civilization. And yes, he's a complete idiot. He pulled over a lady for speeding. With her in the car was her transitioning husband who was sweating in the back seat. When he questioned her, she said they were on the way to the hospital because her husband was in labor. Of course, he called BS because the guy looked as manly as you could get. He started writing a ticket. The whole time, the husband was screaming in the back seat and the wife was hollering at the trooper and trying to calm her husband down. The trooper was mostly ignoring them until he heard the words, "It's coming out," and sure enough, there was a head. So yeah, he had to deliver a baby from a trans man on the side of the road while cows mooed at them from the fence. That's unusual, right? Is it not biologically impossible? Or what am I missing here? Someone please educate me in the comments below. I'd super appreciate it. Thanks in advance. Story 28. Not a cop, but I have one from the other perspective. I was home from college for fall break. My friends wanted to smoke, but I didn't, so I literally chilled in my friend's car parked in some random development while they smoked with some chicks elsewhere. 10 minutes go by and 3 cop cars come swarming in from every direction with their lights flashing and blinding spotlights shining directly on my face. Immediately, I thought some old lady thought we were robbing, so I played it cool and collective. They come walking up to the side of the car and I get out. They ask what I'm doing here, and I respond with the most rational thing you could think of on the spot. My bro from college is trying to have intimacy with a girl, but we have to leave tonight. His facial expression went from curious to, "Are you friggin' serious?" A little while later, my friend comes walking out of the woods, just strolling along like he actually had intimacy. I come walking up to give him my story. The cops yell for him to come over. Cops ask, "So, what were you doing back there?" And my bro was like, I was trying to get it in, but ended up talking about feelings." Story 29. Not a cop, but I was the one with an excuse. I just started uni at the time. My friend and I were hanging out and decided to go back to my place. We walk in the front door to see my dad sitting on the couch, head in hands, just looking overwhelmed. Behind him, my two sisters are screaming and running back and forth with a plastic bin, and upon realizing I'm there, start yelling for me to grab the cats because they're trying to eat a bat. Long story short, my friend and I join them in screaming while trying to catch this bat and keep the cats away from it. We finally catch the bat, and everything is silent for a few moments until there's a bang on the door. Dad answers it and calls us girls over to explain that there was indeed a bat and no one was being terminated like the neighbors thought. The officers looked so done with life after we talked to them. Story 30. Obligatory, not a cop, but I have a decent story. I used to be a snake and reptile breeder and rescuer, while a friend of mine who was a male dancer had decided to purchase a snake from me. Our schedules rarely matched up, so I offered to go to the city after he finished work one night, deliver the snake, terrarium, feeders, and help him set it up. No big deal, I'm a night owl, so a 3 a.m. drive is not a big deal for me. So the night comes and I'm on my way. Out of frickin' nowhere, I hear a siren and see lights. I pull to the side, assuming they will fly past me. I wasn't speeding, no lights out, so thought nothing of it. Well, I'll be damned. He pulls in right behind me. He approaches my van. Police. Do you know why I pulled you over? Me? No. Police. That was incredibly reckless. You nearly terminated me on that lane change. I'm thinking, I used my signal but didn't see anyone else on the road. It's frickin' 3 a.m. Me. What? Police. You nearly terminated me. Me. What? Where? When? How? The officer then explains he was in the next lane over, and I just about ran him off the road when I changed lanes. Me. Officer, I'm sorry, but I didn't see you. Maybe if you had your headlights on, I would have seen your black car in the next lane. Officer looks back and sees his driver's on but lacks headlights. Oh, well, where are you going in such a rush? Can I see your papers? Me. I'm going to deliver a snake to a friend. Police. At 3 a.m.? Me. Yep. Proceeds to pull my purse from the passenger seat, pass the officer a tied-off pillowcase from the purse. Could you hold this while I dig for my license, please? Police. Sir, screaming wildly and tosses the pillowcase. What the hell is in there? It moved. Me. Oh, that's just the snake I'm delivering. He went absolutely pale, ran back to his car and drove off after turning on his headlights at least. I hopped out, grabbed my snake, and continued on my way. Story 31. Not a cop, but my then girlfriend was driving me home after I had a very big night out. I had spilled whiskey on myself, so I stunk of booze. We got pulled over, and he breathalyzed her. It came back positive for drinking. She burst into tears and said she was the sober driver and there must be something wrong. The cop quickly apologized and asked her to do another breath test out of the car, away from me and my booze-soaked mess. She collected herself and passed the test. The cop walked over to the car, and I said I owed my girlfriend's McDonald's. I was all too keen to stuff my face with food. Story 32. Posting for the cop that pulled me over because I don't think he uses Reddit. My girlfriend and I were in my car, stopped at a light with the windows up when I noticed classical music. Immediately, I rolled down the windows to see who was blasting that stuff loud enough for me to hear in my closed car. The music swelled, and we determined it was coming from the neighborhood next to us. Naturally, I turned in to see who was throwing this absolute rager. I signaled, but I otherwise, without warning, just dived into this place, and the officer behind me, whom I now was just now noticing, followed me in. Oh, he wants us, I said as I noticed the no outlet sign near the entrance. The music had faded by this point because, of course, idiot, it was a car in front of me playing the music. No one would be partying to that, so I pulled into a cul-de-sac and tried to turn around, and the cop was parked at the head of the street. He lit me up and pulled up to me, and after ID and registration, basically asked me what I was doing because he ran my plate and knew I didn't live here. Well, officer, I heard loud classical music and I wanted to see where the awesome party was. He was dumbfounded. He said to me, okay, look, I don't believe you, but this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, so I'm going to pull over there, don't go anywhere, and get out, and you're going to tell me that story again. I did. He was laughing by this point. After a pause, he said, I just want you to know that this is the most absurd story I've ever heard, and it's completely true? Yes, sir. All right, now, have a good day. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.